I've been writing and talking about what happens when we fail to deal with racism for a while now. In my book, Understanding and Dealing with Everyday Racism, the Six Stages Framework, and in my article, If Racism Was a Virus. I know some people out there have not always wanted to hear or read these posts, but honestly, what's happening in the UK right now, the rioting, reinforces my and many others' concerns. We are seeing what happens when we fail to deal with hate and intolerance, and when we allow the targeting of people because of the color of their skin. We have to know and understand that we're stocking up problems for the future. When we fail to speak up, when injustices are occurring, and when we witness discrimination and racism, we have to recognize that we're slowly allowing fuel to be poured onto smoldering wood, and we're feeding the hate monster. In my book, Understanding and Dealing with Everyday Racism, the Six Stages Framework, I asked, so what does it take and what are the costs if we fail to do this work? I went on to talk about the spectrum of racism. And I went on to say that we have to understand that some behaviors and dumb questions, even if they may not appear to be extreme forms of racism, they are on the spectrum and they are racism nonetheless. They point to some underlying or simmering prejudice that is at risk of bubbling over into more insidious and extreme forms of racism. That is exactly what we're seeing on the streets right now. The tensions and behaviors we're seeing in the UK did not just start a few days ago. They've been fermenting and simmering, and they've been fueled by denials that racism exists and the so-called rhetoric of victim narratives of those who are accused of complaining about racism. In the context of the Six Stages Framework, people who are at stages +1 and -1 are not racists in the extreme sense of the word. However, some of them are guilty of casual racism as defined previously, whereby issues of racial equity and inclusion are not on their radar and they're not interested or aware of the issues others face. Similarly, I went on to say that people who are at stages -2 and -3 may not be radical or terrorists. However, their behaviors and beliefs show a level of intent which makes them vulnerable to being groomed or radicalized. If they proceed further on the negative axis, that is more concerning and they may pose a real danger to those who are different. We all need to appreciate the damaging effects of all forms of racism on individual people and on society, regardless of the position of that racism on the racism spectrum. Well, we're certainly seeing what happens when people's behaviors spiral down the negative axis of the Six Stages Framework. For many watching the events in the UK, there's a frightening realization that these racist people walk amongst us. They're not just rioters on the streets, but as I heard someone say on the news, come Monday morning, they'll be in our workplaces. Someone also commented that things are quieter today, i.e. on Monday, and he went on to state that certainly things are quieter out there, and he added, I guess even rioters have day jobs. That is so true. What we're seeing are not just right-wing thugs, they're also professional people and people who work with us. We need to recognize the problems we're faced with and not deny the existence of racism or hate. We need to get better at understanding the root cause of racism and at identifying the continuum of behaviors and dealing with the biases early on. In my article, If Racism Was a Virus, I talked about the conditions in which racism thrive and how we can stop individuals spiraling down the negative axis of the 6 stages framework. I said, we need to stop burying our heads in the sand and pretending that racism and hate crime in general is not a problem. We need to stop pretending that we do not have problems as a society and globally relating to racial injustice and racial discrimination. These problems exist, and we cannot wait until we reach a crisis point before acting. The article was a call to action for individuals and organizations to engage more actively in these issues and to challenge racism if they were not doing so already. On 14th of March 2024, I wrote the following blog article, Understanding What Racism and Extremism Look Like, and challenging biases before they become extreme and before they spiral down the negative axis of the 6 stages framework. I stated, in supporting individuals and organizations to understand and challenge racism, it is important to explore and to be able to identify some of the beliefs, values, and behaviors individuals and organizations engage in as they struggle to reformulate their views and challenge their own prejudices and behaviors. The 6 stages framework supports us to recognize different types of biases, discrimination, and different stages of racism. If we are to redefine extremism or right-wing thuggery, we need to be able to map out the different types of biases and racism and consider racism on a continuum and understand how this shows up. Racism, wherever it exists on that continuum, is racism. However, we need to get better at understanding the root causes of these behaviors and being able to understand how these behaviors manifest and how we can stop them. Visit my website, 6stagesframework.com, and check out some of those earlier articles and blogs that I referred to. Stay safe, and our work is just beginning.